Wakefield, it's the Nolan Car Night Show. Inviting you to join Nolan's guest this week, Mergin Sina, to the show. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here's Nolan.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the program. And whether you're from Rhode Island, you're from the New York area, you like college basketball, you're a basketball person, a junkie, and as another interview this my guest this week did, you're a basketball head. You may know this person. He is part of probably the most legendary team in URI basketball history, the 1987-88 team. You can now see him on the sidelines inspiring, coaching the future generations of basketball. He is the one and only Mr. Mergin Sina. How are you doing today, Mr. Sina?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Well, I had Kenny on, and we briefly talked about when we first got in contact. So I said, why not have another big time player of URI? We sort of briefly for a few seconds talked before we got going about how it's going. So for you at this stage of these crazy times we find ourselves in, how's life going for you?
It's going well. I mean, listen, basketball keeps you occupied. Whether even the time during COVID, obviously there was some times where it wasn't functioning, we weren't playing, and kids were sitting out. But once it opened up a little bit, we got back into it. But yeah, I mean, basketball's been my life, so it's an enjoyment to be around it, and I'm still doing it at a different type of thing,
Yeah.
coaching instead of playing. But I really enjoy it.
Well, and I can relate to you in a sense, but maybe more towards your son who you run your academy with. But my father doesn't coach basketball, he coaches tennis, and he's been coaching at the local high school in my town where I live in South Kingstown for the last nearly 30 years. So I have some sort of idea of how you've been able to look at and appreciate what you're able to do now with coaching compared to at the beginning of the pandemic when you might not have been able to do so. What's it like now now that life's sort of gone back to normal with coaching? Because I'm sure you had some struggles at the beginning of this.
Yeah, just more relaxing for the kids and everybody. Obviously, practices are better. We could actually practice.
Yeah.
It was tough because all the kids go through that thing. You know what I mean? So they're at home and they're not sure what's going on, and then it's a really tough time for everybody. But we jumped right back into it. Now it's loosened up here in New Jersey, and this year actually we had a full year, so it was great to be back, and the kids really enjoyed it. So,
and I'm sure, and I forget who I had some. Oh no, now I know who it was. I had a person from NBC 10 here at Rhode Island on a sports broadcast, and I talked to him about the smaller things that you get a greater appreciation for during these last 3 years. What I want to start this conversation about is sort of your beginnings with basketball, and doing my research and off the Academy's website, and then your interview you did with Glenn Harding for Basketball Heads in October. Although you had mentioned your cousin Tom had a big influence in terms of basketball to get you sort of in that direction. What was your relationship like with basketball in terms of playing it, but then also possibly doing it as a career? Was that a reasonable thing?
Get some things. I didn't think, even though I dreamt about it, playing in the NBA and maybe playing in Europe at the time when I was a kid, I didn't know if it was going to come to fruition. But staying with the sport and really having a passion for it, and having an opportunity to actually play in Europe, and I had a couple of tryouts with some NBA teams. It really fulfilled the dream. And but when you're younger, you're out there playing. You know what I mean? You just want to get better and had some good opportunities, and I had some good coaching, and so I was very blessed to find a way to get to that level.
I'm also curious, you mentioned it, it's known you went to Seton Hall, then you went to URI for your final 2 years. When you're getting these offers, whether you're committing to a school in writing or literally physically, you also have all this attention on you when you're getting, I'm sure, these offers to play for schools. So when you were in high school and you were starting to get offers, I know you had mentioned that Basketball Heads interview was until your senior year when you committed to a team. But how did you deal with that in terms of focusing just on basketball when you were starting to get attention for colleges?
Well, I mean, again, I was a little different because honestly, like my dad worked a lot, or 2 jobs. So he didn't really get an opportunity to watch me play. And there was really no guidance in that sense about possibly getting recruited and all that. Back then, it was a little different than it is now. Now you got a lot of social media.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pressure on the kids. So For me, even getting one offer and another, I mean, it was very, I was excited about it. And like I mentioned in the Basketball Heads interview, I was kind of like a late bloomer in the sense of the recruitment process. So there was pressure in the fact that I wanted to play at a high level Division I, and I wasn't getting there until the end. But it was also a blessing maybe, because sometimes all that pressure could line up confuse you.
Sure.
So for me, I kind of made it the hard way, but I thought it was the better way for me. So
sort of jumping, further down the line to present times. How do your experiences there? How do you describe or help those you coach now deal with the same process? Do you still tell them to just, make sure you're focusing on basketball, not worrying necessarily about all the hype and stuff?
Oh, 100%. And now it's a lot, it's the guidance and the tutelage of these kids that you really have to work with, because, I have some players here that I have the number 1 sophomore in the country, the number 3 junior in the country to play on the same team. And I have a couple other high major players. And there's so much pressure on these kids in terms of, where they might go, sneaker brands now, the NIL stuff's coming out now. So there's so many things that are involved with this. And before I used to be a head coach and coach games and practices, and now there's become a little bit of a managing process as well. And, but I try to give them the best information I can. Obviously it's not an easy thing for these younger kids.
Before you went to Seton Hall your first 2 years, and that's a very well done school, and it's a big time school in the Big East. How much were you willing to bet on yourself? Because I'm sure you had to wait for that offer in order to find that bigger school that thought that's where you deserve to be.
Yeah, and again, I thought I could play at that level, but as any young kid, you started worrying as it got later in my senior year that things weren't happening the way I wanted them to happen. But PJ Colesimo, who was the coach back then, literally like in end of March, beginning of April, I can't remember, it was so late into my senior year, showed up in my high school coach's office and said, hey, we'd like to offer you. And it was honestly, it was probably a secondary, third, maybe in a 4th or 5th offer, maybe 4 guys passed. And I was like, that next one, and I just jumped on it. I jumped on it because I didn't really care at that point. I just said, I'm going to work and see if I could pull it through. So.
Well, and I find that interesting because Kenny Green, your teammate at URI, had mentioned and has talked about before in other interviews he's done where he got an offer from URI, but he never toured the campus, never went to the campus. His mother and the coach's wife were talking, and all of a sudden next thing he knew, he was already going to be a URI student. And to hear this perspective is definitely interesting. And you mentioned Coach PJ Carlismo. Besides him, was it the Big East and the conference and how big that conference was and how important that conference was? Was that a deciding factor if you wanted to play for Seton Hall?
Oh, no, it was just, it was, it was the Big East. It was Seton Hall. I didn't even care at that point. I was just like, hey, I'm going to play in the Big East. Whether I play or not, I knew it was going to be a challenge because I kind of knew I was a mature young kid. So I kind of knew the game a little bit where they recruited everybody else and like everybody kind of fell off. And there I was left standing, you know what I mean? Yeah. But for me, it was okay because I got to play in one of the best conferences in the country. So,
and plus it's, although you grew up in New York, New Jersey's not too far away, obviously. What was that like to play relatively near your home state as a college player?
Oh, it was great. And, I didn't really care about like huge campus, this and that. And I grew up in a small apartment with, 8 kids, you know what I mean? So going to college was a blessing. So for me, it was, I was happy to get that offer and even though it didn't work out in terms of, it got me to where I needed to go and move on. So,
Well, I'm curious because you mentioned, I keep referring back to that Basketball Heads interview because I really enjoyed watching that, listening to it. But you had mentioned that you were the original, you were the first person to originally get the Pistol Pete nickname in the Rutgers.
Yeah, down in the Rutgers Pro, in the Pro League.
When was that? Because I'm curious to hear that story.
So I was in the process of transferring from Seton Hall, and it was that summer in between, and So I was not a little down, but you know what I mean? I was trying to figure out where I was going to go. And so I played with a group of guys, and, you know, I went down there and I put on a pretty good show, whatever that means, right? So I was so excited about maybe a new opportunity to play somewhere else. I knew I had the ability. But yeah, so I played in the game. I forgot who was on. I think it was Ed Pickney and Mark J. It was loaded. The place was packed. And so I dropped like 40 points in a game or something. And then all of a sudden, you know, guys are running, you know, Rucker's great, you know, and they just give you that nickname, you know. So they called me Pistol Pete, and I laughed about it. I thought it was great, and you know, so I joked about it because some other guys got that afterwards. If I told him I was the original,
gotta set the record straight that
I was the first
Pistol Pete. Yeah,
it's okay, it's all good.
A thing, you know, although I'm not a basketball player, I didn't play in high school, college. You know, I tried my best to give myself at least 2 misses from every men's URI game the last 4 years that I've been at URI. And being that I'm always there, I tend to see certain things. And one of the things I see is that you see a lot of college athletes nowadays, and I think it's a byproduct of social media, where they don't get what they think they deserve in terms of playing time, minutes, or success, or scoring. Your freshman year, although you may not have started every game after doing, you know, research with Basketball Reference, how do you deal with a culture change in terms of that next level, where high school you're doing so well, you're so successful, you're getting offers, and then you're going to college where you have to sort of wait your turn? Right.
And you know, again, how it works for me in a good way, and maybe in a bad way, some way. I wanted my dad to, you know, obviously be part of everything, right? But he couldn't, right? So I was kind of like a loner in that sense. Yeah. So playing at Seton Hall and, you know, just being there, right? Of course I wanted to play. You know what I mean? But the problem is I had no outlet. So I couldn't talk to anybody about this or that. I just said to myself, I got to get better. Hopefully I'll get an opportunity. And I somewhat got an opportunity my sophomore year. I started some, you know, early in the season, and, you know, just other factors got involved. And I felt that I just wouldn't be able to finish up there if you know, with the recruitment process of other players. And I knew that was going to be the only thing that I worried about. Would I get over recruited, or would they give me a real chance?
Now, another thing that, and I think it's a prime example of what you guys did in the 87-88 year, you know, not wanting to lose. You know, you guys know that you're the best team out there. You're going to kick some serious ass against whoever it is, whatever conference it is. And I'm sure, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like maybe you learned that maybe after your first year, after you experience, okay, I got to wait my time, I got to experience that. After that first year and that sort of adjustment you have to do, maybe attitude or playing wise, does that give you a greater work ethic to maybe try to get into the starting lineup and then wanting to provide more input into the team?
Well, that's what I meant. Yes. I mean, that's the thing. You get hungrier, you know, because you realize now there's 2 ways you could go. You could pout, you know what I mean? And things are not going to work out. But again, the way I looked at it, I thought I believed in my ability. Sure. So I just felt if I kept working, that eventually somebody will understand the rewards they will get at the end of it, right? So, you know, it was a very, and we're talking about Seton Hall here, it was a very competitive environment. Sure. So they brought in a player, John Morton, who was ended up being an NBA player, great player who played my position. I just didn't think there was going to be a future for me.
Sure.
That's where kind of I had to start really rethinking about the opportunity, because I love to play. And I am competitive, as any player would be, but I really tried to make it work to a point. And then, you know, you got to make a decision. And then, you know, it was a decision I made, and I didn't regret it because I had a great time.
Sure, yeah. And I think also, maybe in your situation, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it wasn't, I'm sure, a total waste of a time, because you guys make the conference tournament twice. You make the second round your sophomore year. But for that situation, does that give you confidence, you know, to say, you know, if I can make it here, although it might not be exactly what I want, but if I go to another team, that I have the ability to make it further and provide a bigger impact?
Well, yeah, I thought that. And you know, I'll tell you a quick story, which is crazy, because when I transferred, Brendan Malone was still the coach.
Yeah.
Tom Penders was at Fordham. Sure. So Brendan Malone took the job at the Knicks, and I committed to Rhode Island. So now I'm in a jam here. Sure. So I called Brendan up. I go, Coach, I mean, what am I supposed to do? He goes, well, I'll call some other coaches, you know, in the metropolitan area. because I don't know who the head coach is going to be. I don't want you to be uncomfortable here without me here. So he called Tom Penders, who's at Fordham. So he called Tom Penders. He goes, "Hey, coach, Mergin Sina might be available, even though he committed here. I'm leaving, so he's thinking about possibly doing something else." And Tom Penders told him, "Yeah, I don't like him. I don't think he can play for me." So here's what happens now. I told Coach Malone, I go, "Coach, listen, I'm just going to figure. I don't care who the head coach is. I'm just going to work my ass off. I don't care if he doesn't like me, whatever, because I don't want to. I don't want to do that." Tom Penders gets the job.
Yeah.
So now I already know where I am on the totem pole with him, but it worked out, obviously.
Sure.
I grew on him, and obviously, I thought hopefully I played a big part of that team. So yeah.
And I want to bring that up, and that brings me to the next question I want to talk about. I also want to ask something else. I read somewhere that he was hired maybe a few weeks before the school year started or the season started. Late in that summer. Yeah. And in that situation, I know you sat out that year. Penders told you to sit out that year. How do you deal with that when a coach comes in that late into the season? Because I know there's training camps and whatnot in the summer, but is that something that you really have to just?
Well, it didn't affect me as much because remember, the year I sat out, Tom Penders already was doing he was already committed as a coach. You know what I mean? So the sit out year for me was just kind of watching, practicing with the team, and seeing what was available. So it didn't affect me as much. It actually helped me because I think if I didn't have to sit out and I would have played for Tom Penders the first year, I don't think I would have played. Or maybe eventually I would have. Sure. I think he saw, he saw some things in me in the practices in the sit out year. If that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So
you had mentioned a situation where you came from Seton Hall, you play a position, you're a guard at Seton Hall, and then you go to Rhode Island, you're expecting to be a guard still, and then he says, "Hey, listen, buddy, you're going down to one of the lower positions and you have to put on 15 pounds." Is that an adjustment for you?
Well, that's what happens. So that sit out year, I thought I was killing it in the practices. I'm doing, I'm handling the ball because as a sit out player, you don't know what your position is going to be. So you get to do a little bit of everything. So I'm still thinking, great, I'm handling the ball, I'm doing this stuff. So after the year, they had a solid year. They went to the NIT that year, but everybody was coming back. So there was a future coming, right? There was a progression that we thought we could win the following year. So here I was, they went to NIT. So I went up to his office, like, "Coach, NIT next year, I'm here." Yeah. And he goes, "You're not going to play for me." I go, then I got I go, "Coach, please don't tell me that." I go, he goes, "No, you're not going to play for me if you think you're going to be in the backcourt."
Yeah.
I go, "Okay, well, what do I have to do?" "Well, you got to figure out a way to play the four-man." I literally said this. I go, "What the hell is the four?" He goes, "Well, you got to bang around a little bit. You got to put some pounds on." And you know what? It was a surprise to me, but it really helped me post-college career because I became a more versatile player. Yeah. So at that moment, I wasn't happy. Sure. But we won the next year. Yeah. I rebounded. I became a rebounder, and that helped me professionally. And following up once I graduated. So
sure. I asked this to Kenny when he was on there, and I know in another interviews your other teammates, Silk and Tommy Garrick, had done. You just mentioned there again the NIT appearance. At what point during that season could you tell, and maybe it was too early before the NIT, that your team, URI team, had some potential in terms of doing some damage, whether it be during the regular season or the postseason?
Well, again, I didn't play that year, so I sat out, but I did a lot of watching. So for me personally, I mean, I'm sure Coach Penders thought the same thing. They went to the NIT that year. I think they won 20 or 21 games, 21-9. So I can't remember the exact record, but they lost 4 or 5 games by like 2 or 3. Sure. So there was a small difference in possibly making an NCAA tournament. Yeah. With everybody back and with the pieces that Coach Penders put together, obviously Kenny improved tremendously, and Tom Garrick was the biggest improvement because under Coach Malone, he wasn't the stats didn't show, right? Sure. For 2 years. And then all of a sudden he jumps from 2 points a game to averaging 19 or 20 a game in 1 year. That's insane. That normally doesn't happen. But he got comfortable, obviously, with a different coach. Everybody, connects differently with coaches. And Tom was great with Coach Penders was great with Tom Garrick. And I think that was a key because Silk was great. I mean, Silk, Kenny improved, Bonzi did his thing. I was a utility guy, did a little bit of whatever. John Evans, played hard defender. But that's the one thing Tom Penders really got out of us. I think he said this to us, all you guys were, Mergin, I told you come play here. You should be pissed off. Now show me you can play. Yeah. He was great on motivation. And it really helped us because he used to piss us off in a way too.
Sure.
We could be better than we were. And I was okay with that. I used that a little bit in high school.
Sure.
I used that same type of motivation.
Yeah.
Stuff, so.
Well, I've heard stories and I've seen stories that Kenny told me. Then obviously, as I mentioned, your other teammates have shared in other interviews where he was a motivator and he sometimes occasionally spoke a little French in terms of the verbiage he would use.
Yeah.
And I know Silk had shared a story with someone else where he took an orange before the Missouri game and said, "Screw Missouri, we're going to kick their ass." And he threw the orange and it splattered everywhere.
I do remember that. Yeah. And, there was another time where Tom got kind of, I think it was an all conference. I forgot what it was. And the next game, he just pretty much told us, give Tom the ball every time. And he had 50 that game, So Tom would do, Coach Penders would do things like that. And that's okay. He had his players back. I still talk to Coach Penders many times. So, I think he's one of my favorite coaches. Could be a little, into himself, but that's okay. Most coaches are.
Yeah. What's not? My grandfather, who has coached for 60 years, but he like tennis and that sort of stuff. And he's, a very motivational, very hardcore guy. And you accept it. Sometimes you look at it and it's like, but you do what you can. Yep. I want to ask you, going from Seton Hall, the year, and then, or going from Seton Hall and the success that you had seen in terms of post-conference play, but then you come to URI, the 87-88 year, the historic year. You guys go 28-7 and then second in the conference. What's that like, that transition after then going from Seton Hall and then sitting out to then experiencing that type of success?
Well, personally, and not, it was a bit of sweet revenge,
sure,
in an individual way for me, because, I didn't, my second year at Seton Hall kind of went a little up and down. And I felt like now I'm part of something that, represents winning,
sure,
tournament, So when you start to make that run, you don't even think about the individual stuff anymore.
Sure.
Like that, you really start, it's really, truly about the team's success. And that team just had the perfect pieces, in my opinion, to make that type of run. Got a super backcourt. Kenny was great at the front court. Bonzi was a great defender, blocked shots, did what needed of him. John Evans, multifaceted, defended, slasher. I did, I guess, a little bit of everything. Rebounded a little bit, passed a little bit, shot a little bit. But everybody knew their roles, and I think that's what made it work. And it was a great run, and we believed in it.
Sure,
we did. The whole team believed we could do what we did. And but yeah, what a year.
Well, and that it marvels at me that you had nearly half the team. I think it was when I was looking at Basketball Reference. There were 5 out of 12 players that were scoring nearly over 10 points per game and about 5 rebounds per average. And that really speaks to, I think, the collective effort, the overall goal that yourself and the others had, where it's not just one man, it's multiple guys, and we all know our roles on the team, and we're going to help each other out, and we're going to do the best job we can, because we're not going to back down. I think that's missing from the URI team nowadays, because there's no, I want to say leader, but it's hard, I see, for them when they're up by 15 at half, and then you see that they lose by 10 at the end of the game.
Right.
For you, and you mentioned this, multifaceted player facilitates this and that. How early on that season, not only, when you could see that you guys could do damage, but know that we're accepting the roles that we're going to have on the team, even if we're not the Silk Owens or Tommy Garricks?
Well, we had to accept them. I had to accept it for numerous reasons. If I fought against it, I wasn't going to play. And at one point, you got to suck your ego out of it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And push it aside and just say, look, you know what? I have an opportunity here to play, right? And I think we can be successful. If the coach thinks this is the role I need for us to be successful, then I got to do it at this point. I had no other options, and I didn't want to fight against that. And I saw that, obviously, and I knew Silk way before he went to Rhode Island. So I knew Silk was super talented. I knew Tommy Garrick was super talented. I knew Kenny was super talented. And, you got to fit in there. You know what I
Sure.
mean? And find your little niche. So I thought I did, and I thought it helped in the success of the team. So yeah, but I knew that early on that, hey, I got to play this role, and if I don't, it's not going to work out well for me. So yeah.
You alluded to this or mentioned it a few minutes ago, how that year was sort of a sweet revenge for you. When you see you starting nearly every game, your minutes spike up, your stats and other categories go up. What does that say about your determination to, now that you have this opportunity, that you're gonna do whatever you can to rise to the occasion and prove why you should be here?
Well, that's it. That's once you start getting that confidence, and then again, it became the situation where I was part of a starting team, and I knew because of the work and that I was going to play minimum 30 minutes a game, right? So the confidence builds, team, everything starts to connect. And, I knew that if I stayed with it, that at one point, hopefully I would get an opportunity to be in a situation, maybe, I say maybe, half of the situation that Carlton or Tommy would have ever been, right? But you have to wait your turn for that. And sometimes it never comes.
Sure.
So you got to be prepared for that as well. But, I had a pretty good head on my shoulder. And like I said, I was kind of doing this on my own. My father really didn't know anything about the game. I tell you, worked 2 jobs, I'm telling you right now. And I think he's seen me play once. You know what I mean? So, I think that was part of my success, unfortunately. Right. Even though because sometimes, especially in these days and the present day, parents love their kids, right? Unconditionally. But sometimes it could be a conversation. You come to the house and you're complaining to your parents, and most parents go say, "You're right, your coach is wrong," right? Yeah. And then you get into this little funk, right? My dad, if I ever said that to him, probably would give me a good whack in the mouth and say, "Listen to your coach," because he's a different type of a guy. And that's okay, because that's what got me through it. Yeah.
Sure. Now, being that, and we've talked about the success the season has, but what also, and I don't know if this, people really even discuss this part, and this is sort of similar to, I feel, the women's program at URI. I don't know how much you've paid attention to them, but they had this really great year. They make the conference tournament. They're ranked second in the conference, are projected to make maybe the big dance. Then as the season goes on, near the end, the wheels sort of fall off, and they don't really, I don't want to say meet expectations, but they don't come through with what they were projected to. When you're in that season, the 87-88 year, and you guys you continue to win and rise above and maybe get ranked, and then you make the big dance, how do you deal with that on a week-to-week basis where you have to keep that up, or else, you sort of fall apart?
Well, again, it goes back to everybody's story, right? Tom Garrick played 2 years on the Coach Malone, didn't play. So Tom Garrick had a hunger to him. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Carlton Owens was pretty much left on an island on his own when he came in as a freshman. Super talented, but didn't really win a lot his freshman year. So he had something to prove. Kenny Green was a freak athlete, who came in and like you said, he went to Rhode Island. He didn't know where Rhode Island, he signed with Rhode Island, So you had a bunch of pieces that were put together where there was a lot of, everybody had their individual drive, right? Yeah. To want to prove something, right? And so did Tom Penders, because he was big on that, right? Yeah. So that all connected. So every game we played, we were literally like, before the game, we were so jacked up on games like we think we could have beaten the Knicks or that back then. You know what I mean? So, and that's what made it special. Everybody believed in each other, and as you go through the season, every game was a challenge now, because if we lose 1 or 2, like you're saying, you can backtrack and now be an NIT team. Our goal was to make the tournament. Yeah. And Tom Penders always harped on that and always said, "Hey, this next game is the biggest game of your career." Then the next game he'll go, "This next game is the biggest game." So he kept on us, and we bought into it. And that's why it was so special.
The following year, Tom Penders is no longer the coach. Al Skinner, who was the assistant for a while at URI, becomes the head coach. If you can describe to me what that was like now that Al Skinner was taking over as head coaching and after everyone had sort of graduated.
So this is where it gets a little difficult.
Yeah.
Because, well, if you want to talk about individually or you want to talk about the team. So I'll go individually a little bit. So individually, I was probably a little upset, probably the first time, because now, before Tom left, he said, next year, Mergin, I'm putting you back to the 2, and I'm gonna let you shine. And so I was really looking forward to that because I did everything I can to put my body on the line and all that. And I felt, now I'm a senior, it's my time to get a little bit of the, that cherry pie, whatever that is, right? So Al, and he's a great coach, don't get me wrong. But when he came in, I remember we lost Tommy. We lost Silk, so and Evan, the dynamics changed a little bit and brought in some new recruits. And in a 1-year period, that could get very difficult. Especially after the year we had. So, personally, it was a difficult transition because I kind of backtracked into the role by the end of the year that I had with Coach Penders. The winning didn't happen, in my opinion, because it was too soon. We just didn't have the mesh, the chemistry. We lost a lot. And, that's – the transition was tough, but obviously Al did a great job down the road, and he obviously went to Boston College and did great things. And so I don't take it. I never got upset because at the end of it, I still fulfilled, I think, the dream I had to play in Europe and play for 14 seasons, whatever it was. And a lot of people think I could do it. So, but going through that adversity, I think helped me. I really do. It made me hungry. Even after I graduated. So
now I want to talk about your post-college endeavors as a professional player. How soon after because I remember reading somewhere, I don't know if it was on the Academy's website or wherever it was, that you were part of some of the NBA camp tryouts. But after graduating college, what was your next goal in terms of playing? Was it NBA, or was there a realization that professional overseas was the next option?
No, and even that was up in the air because I didn't know, because the season kind of went like this. So the crazy thing is, I not the NBA wouldn't have been, the statistics wouldn't have, numbers wouldn't have translated, and you had to get into a camp, right? So what I decided to do is I went to someone called me up. There was a European tryout, whatever it was, and they were looking for a player. And we show up in this gym, and I'm not kidding you. Only 4 kids showed up, right? Wow. 3 were represented by the agent that was running the camp and myself. Now, my brother and a friend of mine came to watch because they wanted to see if I could, we actually played 3-on-3 against those 2 kids. And it's a true story. Like, I'm like lighting it up, right? And the agent is telling the head coach of this club about his own players. So the head coach was like, no. Who's that guy? And he wouldn't allow it to, like, because I was just kept on going. He goes, I want that guy, and that's it. And that's how it started. And that's literally how I got my first job. Wow. Because if that didn't happen, I don't think I played 13, 14 years in Europe. Wow. So it was it's just a draw to luck, I guess.
What do you, I mean, then maybe that leads into our sort of answers that the next question is a double dipper, but what do you attribute to your longevity overseas as a player? Was it that, or was it just, was there something else that attribute to your long success there?
It was just a drive. It was just a drive. I loved it. I didn't want to give it up. I put so much work into it, and I knew I had the ability. I just, you go through those adversity times, right? You get some stumbles and some hiccups, but I always believed that I could play at a level, and so I that's what it really is. It's and the problem with most of the kids today is if they have any adversity, they just want to jump ship. Right. So that's what the transfer portals, and you see it now. I mean, forget it. I mean, it's kind of insane. I'm not saying there's not a time where it's so much a transfer, things are getting really bad, but you gotta take some disappointment and sometimes where things might get difficult for you. You can't get through those times. You're not gonna. I don't think you're gonna make it at any level. So,
I also want to ask, and you've mentioned this before, with the longevity, there are also some high moments. How do you assess those situations where you're averaging 23 points per game, or you have that big game in Portugal where, or no, it was Argentina where you score 69 points?
Well, I scored it in Portugal. But I got so hungry after college. I was so I was wound up really tight because I knew I could score, right? But I never had an opportunity to take X amount of shots. Like 6 was my limit or 7. So now I go out to Portugal and this guy's telling me, hey, don't pass the ball to anybody. Now, I didn't like the fact that he said don't, but I also like the fact like he's saying, hey, you can get as many shots up as you want. And I became almost like an animal that was left out of his cage. And I literally, that first year in Portugal, I mean, there was a point where I was averaging like 39 a game. I mean, I just, and it was like 15 rebounds with it and like 7 assists with it. I was just like a mad dog just going then. But again, you go to the, you rewind it and you say, well, what led up to that? All the things I talked about, all the transferring, all the, maybe the ups and downs of some situations. And these are personal things. But that drove me to have an opportunity to play over there. And it was, I had a great experience in Europe. It was, great time in my life.
And like any other situation, and it doesn't necessarily be sports, but if sports holds a greater, I think, resonance within us in terms of what we attribute to sports and how it affects us. When it came time for you to realize that, I think this is it, I'm done. After everything you went through, college, high school, and then professionally, how did you deal with that situation where you had to transition to a different sort of relationship with basketball?
So I was fortunate enough to play a long career without getting hurt. The last year where I was about to get a big contract, I got hurt. Okay. So I was kind of moving up the scale. I was going from Portugal to Argentina to Spain to Italy. These are the levels you go to, right? Yeah. But I was turning 31, 32. So at that time, my son was just born, Jaron. So even though I got hurt and it was a disappointing thing for me, I just didn't think I had 3 or 4 more years left. Maybe I could have stretched it, but I think I got to a point where I did it, right? It's not easy to give it up, but I had such a long career and I was blessed with it. So I just, I took the injury and I came back one year, tried it out. And then I just said, you know what? Yeah, it's time, and that's how I kind of stumbled into the coaching thing. Yeah.
Well, that's sort of what I want to talk to and sort of end the last remainder here, talking about coaching in the academy. For you, how willing were you to make that avenue change into coaching now that you knew that playing wasn't your next option?
Well, again, I didn't know I wanted to be a coach. I came back, like any other athlete, you try to figure out what you want to do in the next part of your career. Unless you're making millions of dollars, you could just sit at home and vacation. That wasn't the case for me, and that's not the case for a lot of players that go there. But I got a phone call. I work in a place called Hoop Heaven. They asked about a girls' high school varsity position. I just scratched my head. I go, I don't know. I went up to the school and looked at the school, private school, tons of acres, 70 acres of land, beautiful gym. I go, how's the girls' team? They go, they stink. They're like 1 in 25. I go, ooh, do I want to take this challenge? So I literally took the job because at the time, I'll be honest with you, it was more of a financial thing because they offered a couple of weeks of camp. Sure. And I just said, you know what, I'll make some money in the summer because I saw the area. I thought it would work. And maybe I could build a program and see how it goes. And I ended up doing that with the girls. We ended up we were like number 331 in the state. And I think there's 333 high schools in the state. And by my 3rd year, we ended up being like number 2 in the state.
Wow.
And completely changed the program. So I did that for about 5-6 years. And then my son came along with some kids I coached with my academy, and they came to the school. And I took over the boys program, which was awful. And we ended up becoming a nationally ranked team. So I built 2 programs really basically from scratch. And then I got the bug. Sure. You know what I mean? It was I love the kids. I coach kids. They were hard workers. And, it just grew. And, so far our school has been up in the top 5 since then, it's just because of hard work and all that stuff. So
we've talked about adjusting, whether it's from high school to college and adjusting to the fame that comes along with the attention, and then adjusting to then, at URI and then professionally. Adjusting, how did you adjust in comparison to playing college to then coaching the first few years? Because now you have to get these kids to listen, and sometimes they don't want to do that because they have a different viewpoint.
Well, the beauty about me is I've been through so many different coaches. So sure. PJ, Brother Malone, Tom Penders, Al Skinner. I mean, I could, so, and in Europe, I went through some some former Yugoslavian coaches, hard-nosed guys. I went through every personality possible, right? So what I did, I kind of picked what I liked about certain people, and I kind of tried to mold it into what I was doing. And I think that helped me as a coach. The motivational part, more than anything, I took from Coach Penders, and the kind of the style of play. PJ was he was a yeller. He was a passion, and I took a little bit of that, not enough, but I mean not a lot, but passion. I bring my points across. The biggest challenge is how do you get 10 kids, right? 11 kids, whatever the roster is, to gel and fit what you want to do on the court, right? So, but like I said, I use that, take a piece of here, take a piece from here. And I think that's why I became somewhat successful as a high school coach.
I'd say if you took a program from 331st to top 5 in the state, I think that's more than a little bit successful.
No, you don't understand how bad it was. I mean, I'm talking about it was better, but they were great girls. The first couple, they were super good, but they played soccer, trying to play basketball. It wasn't. The 3 people in the stands was my wife, my daughter, and my son Jaron. Who's just there was nobody in the stands. So but to build it, it was something, because you could get something that's there already, and you can be successful with it, but there's a difference and that's where the Rhode Island thing comes even too. No one knew. You built something, all of a sudden now you're going to the Sweet 16, and just the feeling's a little bit better than the normal, run. So
not only besides, I'm also curious on this situation. Not only finding success as a coach, as we've talked about, but then you've also been able to coach and run your academy with your son. What's that like doing it? Because I'm sure that brings you a lot of pride and joy.
Yeah, I mean, we built it from scratch. Another one. I started as a one-man show. I started with like 2 teams. Now we got 16 teams. Wow. We've got, summer camps. We've got training, and so I was very fortunate that. And again, I'm a Brooklyn guy, so when I went to Gill St. Bernard's up in, there was cows, horses. Sure. I didn't even know what I was getting myself into, but because I became the high school coach and because I built something, I started getting kind of a following in the area. Sure. And I think that helped the transition into the academy. So like I said, I had 2, now we have 16. I had 2 weeks of camp, now I got 8, so it all got built. My son, obviously, after he played professionally 4 or 5 years, he just became a coach last year in the same town as us at the public school. My daughter played, we're all basketball people. So for us, it's what our lives have been. So,
that's like in my household, my father, coached my sister, and I don't know if it was AU, whatever it was, but that always constant drives. I'm sure. I don't know who's older, your son or your daughter?
My son's older.
Well, I'm the older. I have 2 younger sisters, both played sports, much better athletes than me in terms of basketball, but a lot of soccer tournaments and that sort of stuff dragged along. So I sort of know what that's like when everything's involved with that. At this point, though, in your basketball career, what's your relationship like with the sport?
In terms of just in general, overall? Yeah. I mean, I still consider myself a little bit old school. Sure. In the sense of mentality and how to get somewhere and how to succeed somewhere. My only worry, if there's a worry about the sport of basketball now, is that a lot of the kids, how do I put it, want it easy.
Sure, exactly, yeah.
Okay? And you mentioned something to me earlier about how some of the Rhode Island teams, I'll use them as an example, kind of are here and then kind of do this.
Sure.
Most of the time, I don't know if it's the coaching. It could be a little bit of the coaching, or maybe, but most of the time there's something going on within the unit, right? Yeah. And it's hard these days, it's hard to find kids that really, and then when they say, I want to win, I'm is that genuine, right? So, the way I've coached and the way players that have graduated from my program, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, 99% of them, and I mean 99, I don't even know if I have went to college, either played significant minutes as freshmen or started at their programs, and stuck it out most of the time. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
Not transfer when things got bad. My own son had to transfer, just like I did. but had to do with some other things that I don't really want to,
No, sure. Yeah.
stuff, just situations where he had to move.
Yeah.
So that's, to me, where I worry a little bit, because when you see the influx of European players coming in, right, who used to be, in my opinion, what we were when we were growing up younger. We had a hunger for it. We trained for it.
Yeah.
We were, everything we did was passionate about it. The kids now have kind of lost that a little bit.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And it's not their fault.
Yeah.
It's the social media stuff could literally destroy you. And think about the pressures they have. I told you I have the number one player on the every day. They could have a bad game on the AU circuit, but they're great.
Yeah.
And I'm telling them, like, listen, you got to get better, or, and it's tough love in some ways, but I always want to prepare them.
Yeah.
Because somebody has to tell them the truth.
Sure.
At one point. Not that I'm not saying you're not the number one player. What I'm trying to tell you is, if you want to be the number one player and you want to sustain it, you better be hungry.
Of course.
You better want to keep working. You want to be taught, and so if there's I call it a worry, that would be it as a coach for me.
Well, and I'm sure that's, and maybe I'm wrong, but maybe something that brings probably the most challenge coaching nowadays, trying to teach that will to win, that hunger to have in that sport in order to achieve whether you'd be able to achieve or any of the other teammates have achieved in college. Before we end today, I want to end on a little game I do with all my guests. It's called the One Word Challenge. So in this segment, what I do is I put together a list of 5, 6, 7 names of places, people, or whatever maybe that have some connection to my guests, and they have to do the best to say a word or two or even a sentence.
Okay.
That they think of. So are you ready, Mergin?
Sounds good. Go ahead.
First one, Ocean Parkway.
Russians.
St. Rosalia, CYO.
Great place to play as a youngster. I know it's a sentence, but that's what
overseas basketball.
Love the culture.
Tom Penders.
Interesting.
Silk Owens.
The best, in my opinion.
Keeney Jim.
Exciting.
And last but certainly not least, Mergin Sina.
Still time to try to figure that one out.
Well, Coach, this has been a true pleasure, and I appreciate your willingness to do this and you reaching out. And
no, you're great, man. I like what you're doing. It seems you're a young kid and you're getting into this stuff, and whatever I could do to help you, if there's anything I could do, just let me know. I mean, you're doing a good job there.
I appreciate. Well, for all those out there who enjoy this, because be honest, who wouldn't enjoy this? Do yourself a favor, like, comment, share, subscribe, all that fun jazz. Because in 10 years down the road, and Coach Sina is doing even more amazing stuff, taking, I don't even know what it is, but you're going to want to enjoy. You're going to look back and say, holy crap, I wish I subscribed back then 10 years ago. Follow Instagram and Twitter, Nolan Cart Night Show. Coach, is there anything that you would like to promote or put out there for anyone? No, just, look, I still follow the program. I want them to do a little bit better with the past players. Sure.
I always talked about this, and I'm not being. It's very important that if there's a history there, and I want Rhode Island, because we all have, we left a lot of sweat and tears at that school, and I hope the alumni and the athletic department, and not for Coach Sina, but more for the Tom Garricks and then Carlton Owens and the Kenny Greens, they have to do a better job connecting with these guys, because that's what keeps the history going.
Sure.
And I'm hoping that'll be the case.
Well, I hope so too. And I hope I see it. And because like you've said, you guys, and I've mentioned this, and it's known that you guys put in a lot of hard work, put a lot of determination, and you see a lot of schools across the country, regardless if they're big time schools or not, they have a lot of numbers retired, coaches retired, teams retired. And it is those people who have achieved that, they want to see it returned, and that they want that to inspire the future coaches and players and fans and stuff like that.
I remember, we're still connected. Me and Carlton talk. Me and Bonzi talk. But we are not connected as much with a place where we were all, in one area, So again, I'm hoping they'll do that. I'm a big, proponent of it. I'm hoping they'll change a little bit. but
Yeah.
nothing negative, but just,
No, yeah. We'll see. I have a feeling that we'll be seeing a jersey retired, hopefully in the near future.
I would be there clapping.
Of course, and I'll be in the fan section somewhere clapping.
We can meet up.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, in the words of Johnny Carson, I bid you a heartfelt good night till we see each other again.